Fantasy Football Warriors. Welcome to the Fantasy Football Warriors podcast. We are your hosts, Eddie, Bravo, the Tank Sinatra. You already know what time it is. It is draft season. Mock drafting better be in bloom. You better be doing it. Preparing for these drafts coming up. Ours are coming up in 2 weeks. I know some of you have already drafted. God bless, but most of you are going to be drafting here in the next couple weeks. So we're going to provide you some of the insights needed so that you can nail your draft. Are we ready?
We're ready.
All right. Please, Fantasy Football Warriors, for the love of everything holy, the very first step that you need to know to nail your draft is know your rules. Know your rules. Know your scoring. Know your league settings. Know your positional makeup of your teams. All that jazz, right? It is so vital. You know, I'm a big Vince Lombardi believer, right? Mm-hmm. When he first got the head coaching job for the Green Bay Packers way back, right? He started his very first team meeting by talking to his team and saying, "Gentlemen, this is a football." That's how he started. That was the very first basic thing he told his team. You see this thing? This is a football. That's how he started. So for God's sakes, know the basics, know your rules before you even start drafting, okay? I think one of the things that gets lost, especially during real-time drafting, is player value in real time, right? I know that everyone has their favorite folks that they follow, and they have cheat sheets and rankings.
Hopefully that's us.
And hopefully that's the Fantasy Football Warriors, right? And they have all this rankings and all these cheat sheets and all this stuff, and they're ready for their draft, right? And this sheet tells them, oh, this is, this player's valued here, right? But then as the draft moves along, how does that change?
Changes significantly, yeah. As we talked about in our last mock draft video, depending on how you draft, your value for certain players and positions is going to drastically change. While, for example, we'll just use the mock draft, right?
Yep,
we went double running back in that draft, back to back, and we talked about how now we had to balance out the value by grabbing more wide receivers in the subsequent rounds, because early picks carry more value because they're more concrete. They have higher upside, higher floors than, and the upside and the floors all diminish as a draft goes on. And so if you do what like we did in that draft and went double running back, now there's a void at wide receiver in terms of value. And in order to kind of match the value there, you need to take more shots at wide receiver. Each player has an imaginary value number, right? Let's say in that draft we went Saquon Barkley and Chase Brown in the first 2 rounds. Let's say they have, Saquon had a value of 10, Chase Brown had a value of 8, right? We have 18 value points into running back at that point. And in the subsequent rounds, let's say, I think it was what? DJ Moore.
We hit on Moore.
DJ Moore, George Pickens, Calvin
Ridley, yeah.
I think that
was it.
So let's just say maybe it wasn't that. Let's say those are our 3 guys. Maybe DJ Moore has a value of 7, George Pickens 5, Calvin Ridley 4, right? Let's just say those are the subsequent value points, right? We need to try to get back up to 18 with our wide receivers by grabbing more wide receivers to equalize the value at each position and aid in our effort of hitting at wide receiver as well as running back. We feel confident in those running backs. Now we need to take more shots at wide receiver to land some that we feel good about. And so depending on how you approach your draft, the value of certain positions will change. It's not necessarily an objective thing. It's fluid. It's subjective based on what you're doing in the draft. Like you talked about with your scoring, even how you score. For most of you, that's just going to be PPR or standard, right? And PPR receptions, wide receivers get a bump, and so you're probably going to want to start 3 wide receivers typically in a PPR league, right? And so that's going to affect how positions and players are valued depending on what they do on the field, right? For example, someone like Amon-Ra St. Brown in PPR is heavily valued because he's going to rack up those receptions,
Right.
whereas maybe someone in standard where your receptions aren't as valued, someone like Brian Thomas Jr., who's going to accumulate yards and touchdowns through less of a PPR focused way and
Right.
more through deeper shots, right? That's not going to matter as much. Whereas in PPR, Amon-Ra St. Brown, because he's accumulating those receptions on top of it, that might be a little more valuable. So players, positions, all of that is fluid throughout your draft, depending on a variety of factors that I touched on.
Yeah. Some leagues are tight end premium scoring.
Yeah.
Like tight ends get a bump in their receptions at like 1.5 per reception. That makes more tight ends more valuable than your standard leagues, right? So understanding how your scoring affects the value of these players as well is super important, right? And that just circles the wagon on know your league, know your scoring, all that
And I'm
jazz.
just saying how that affects the value of your players, how your
Yeah,
draft strategy affects the value throughout your draft, right?
right. Because you may have your cheat sheet in front of you, and you may have gone running back in the first couple rounds, and now you hit round 3, and you have wide receivers there that, according to your sheet, are
Less valuable than a
less
running back there,
valuable, right?
but
But
you've
for
got to
the
avoid it. Yeah.
composition, for the makeup of your team, these wide receivers are now valuable,
Yep.
right? Like you got to
More
understand,
valuable than
right?
taking that third running back, right?
Exactly. You have to understand that. So, positional scarcity,
Kind of touches on what we were
a little
talking
bit,
about.
right? Yeah.
Understanding how your draft board is both making value scarce at a position, and you know everything is a give and take, yin and yang. Where there is a scarcity at one position, that means there's a surplus at another position, right?
Right.
Everyone has a hard on for wide receivers these days, and I'm sure it'll no doubt be that way in most of y'all's drafts this year,
Yep.
right? All that means is either you can flock with the sheep and try to hit on the wide receivers as well, right? That's fine, but if you find in your draft that it's particularly scarce, that typically means you're going to need to pivot if you want. Because at that point, all you're doing is getting the worst wide receivers of the
Right.
bunch and you're behind, right? But that scarcity, like I said, creates a surplus elsewhere. So now there's going to be a surplus at running back, QB, tight end. If you can now hit on those positions, now you have a advantageous position over your league mates instead of just falling in line with the wide receivers where you just got the worst wide receiver of the bunch. Maybe now you have the best running back and tight end of the bunch.
Right.
And now, as we talked about a moment ago with the value, now what that means is you've got more value soaked into running back and tight end. And so later in your draft, you want to take as many shots as wide receiver as possible. You hopefully walked away confident in this hypothetical situation that you have the best running back and tight end of the group there because you pivoted away from what was scarce to what was plentiful, and now you need to at least hit on a couple of wide receivers that'll be serviceable. You're not going to have wide receivers that are better than your league mates at that point. If they soaked up the Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Malik Neighbors, Puka Nakua, Brian Thomas, if all a few more, all of those guys went in the first round, and now you're sitting at 12 and you wanted to draft wide receiver. It's probably not your best bet because all of the high premium ones are gone. All you're going to do is get the worst wide receiver out of that tier, right?
Yep.
So instead, maybe you can get the best or second best running back out of that tier and maybe the best tight end out of that tier, and now you've got a positional advantage somewhere, and now all you need to do is hope that you can hit on serviceable wide receivers. So understanding how positional scarcity and surpluses affect how you should be approaching your draft is very important.
Absolutely. Mock draft, please. Mock draft. Just mock draft. Mock draft is like a risk. It's not like. It is literally a risk-free environment where you can strategize, mock from different positions, 11, 4, 6, whatever. You can use different strategies, see how they work out. Hero running back, zero running back, whatever the case may be. It is a risk-free environment to practice in. It's so super helpful. It,
Practice all these concepts. The concepts we are talking about right now, the only reason, or only, not reason, only way that you can begin to do these in real time in your draft is to practice it in mock drafts, to do a mock draft and understand when we see that positional scarcity and how you can adjust, to understand, in your scoring, how you're going to plan ahead for which players you're going to select. It's all about, this is where you practice it so that you can do it on draft day, so that you can fully grasp these concepts and be able to put them into practice.
yeah, and it's always super helpful to do mock drafts in different environments, right? Like use Fantasy Pros, use ESPN, use Sleeper, use Yahoo,
yeah, whatever.
use right. You know, it just gives you that much more perspective on a broader, just gives you a broader view of the
Potential.
draft landscape, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you want to do a lot of mock drafts using your particular
Platform.
platform, right? Because that's what you're gonna see on draft day. But it's still really great to venture off to these other platforms as well and see what they're doing, because it's just gonna keep you sharp, give you that fluidity that we talk about, that flexibility come draft day to pivot and not panic, right? All right. Identifying late players. Nothing nothing is worse than getting into the later rounds when all the obvious choices are gone and here you are on the clock and you're just like, uh, and the clock's ticking. Yep, that's the worst, right?
That is the worst. And the issue is, as I talked about, as you get later and later in drafts, the value of all these players diminishes because their floors are more uncertain, their ceilings are harder
Their
to attain.
situations are
Right?
uncertain, right?
So it's important to go into your draft. This is where mock drafting comes in too. Understanding, once you get to rounds 10, 11 on, who the players you actually like, where the floors are, where the ceilings are, where the, I want to say the most favorable, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it's the most uncertain situations where you can uh, take the discount because of the uncertainty,
Right.
right? But understanding where your targets are and just going and getting them. At this point in the draft, there is no playing value. There is no playing ADP game, really. You just want to identify your targets pre-draft that you want to go get in those later rounds and
Just go get them.
just grab them in those last few picks, and maybe you hit, maybe you don't. That's kind of the nature of this late in the draft.
Right. Um let's not let's not forget that this is a game of projections and theory and minimizing risk. Uh, but there is a little luck involved sometimes, right? Like, so go get your guys. That late in the draft, identify your guys, go get them, and let a little bit of luck carry you the rest of the way, right? So I know in previous years it was, even as early as last year and the year before that, like grabbing a quarterback early was like that's where the
That's where
kind
the
of the
trend was
the
going. Yeah.
trend was going, right? You had to get your quarterback early. If you didn't get your quarterback early, oh man, all hope was lost. This is not one of those years.
You absolutely can.
You can. I'm
Right.
not saying don't, but this is not one of those years where it's that has to happen. You can wait on QB this year. There are options in the later
Yeah,
rounds.
there's kind of a surplus of serviceable QBs and quarterbacks that could easily creep into high end production. So It's definitely like the tight end position where it's either you grab one of the top premium guys or you hike it and double dip, really. And as I talked about on our last mock draft video, I probably wouldn't want to do both
Right.
punt, quarterback, and tight end. I would think you either grab a premium tight end or you grab a premium quarterback and then punt the other ones and just double dip late. But for the most part, I think it's in your best interest to avoid the middle tier of quarterbacks
Yeah.
and tight ends. Just avoid that altogether and instead either double dip and try to get really good value and hit on one of those later guys, or just secure a no-brainer premium guy and call it a day.
All right. Wide receivers we're seeing are drying up pretty early um, this year in the first couple rounds, right? And we
Significant
already,
tier break.
yeah, super, super big tier break there. So is it essential for you to grab a wide receiver early?
Depends on your build, depends on how your draft is going, depends on all these factors we already talked about. Understanding how your draft is shaping out, because, yeah, you're probably going to be pretty happy if you get one of those. Like, it's almost like the first round wide receivers, and then as soon as the second round, there's like
You start
it's
seeing
it's
that.
first and early second, and then after that, there's like
Yeah. Yeah.
way more like I'm not in love with this player
Yeah.
necessarily. So it's either you get some of those early guys and you're happy with it, or you do the opposite where you understand how your draft is going and maybe everyone else is doing that, and so you hit on the running backs, and then from there, it's
Yeah.
try to hit on the value of some of the middle range guys. But yeah, there's a tier drop off there, so you have to understand that and either secure one of the elite guys or make sure you are really trying to throw as many darts as you can to
Yeah.
alleviate the strain of that
Yeah.
kind of middle
And
tier.
that was just more of a something to know for this year. If you haven't been mock drafting, wide receivers are drying up pretty quick. Just know that. We already touched on tight end, right? Grab one of the premium guys early or double dip later, right? Um, understand, fantasy football warriors, that last year was last year, right? And I'm not saying that last year's Nuggets aren't important or they're not uh, valuable this year, right? But last year was last year. You got to start with a fresh slate. Um, like I said earlier, at the end of the day, this is a game of projections and theory, and you use the best information available in the moment to make good decisions. Last year's information is, I don't want to say it's irrelevant.
It's not, but it's not all relevant,
Right.
right? It's tough. It's a tough balance because you want to take into consideration history, but you don't
Right.
want it to corrupt how you see things going forward, right? It's a delicate balance, and you just have to understand that not everything is relevant and things change. Players develop, situations develop, coaching matters. Um, there's so many things that happen year to year that can make it very difficult to use last year's information to
Right.
project, or even several years of information to project. For example, it's it was especially over the last previous couple of years. It was like running backs reach 28, you can't draft them because they're gonna fall off a cliff, right? Because that's what some of the historical data was suggesting, right? And while that data isn't incorrect, it's not fully telling of the whole story. You also have to understand that data includes your James Whites of the world, your non-elite players that, yeah, after 28, they're not even in the league anymore. So, yeah, the data is going to show after 28, they fall off a cliff. But why is Derrick Henry
At
31 years old and
31.
still pushing? Because the data doesn't factor in these intangibles, right? So history can be deceiving because it's not always telling of the full picture, right? So for that specifically, yes, that is historical context, and those previous years can play a factor, but you have to understand where it ends, right? All systems have limits, and to a certain extent, these elite players are elite for a reason, and so they are the outliers. So you can't paint them with the same broad brush, right? So understand last year, understand the previous years, but every year is different in a new way. Every player's circumstance is slightly different in a new way. Just because Travis Etienne was a bum last year doesn't mean he's going to be a bum this year. It's a new coaching staff, it's a new regime, it's a new offense that could yield itself to uh, a more beneficial running scheme, a more efficient running scheme, and it's also a new coaching staff that might feel more okay with giving Etienne a stronger workload than what was going on last year.
Definitely possible.
So it's you can use last year, but you have to understand it within context, and that's the biggest thing.
Devontae Adams, right? Last year with the Raiders, this year with the Rams. What does that mean for him? We don't know. At the end of the day, yes, it's still Devontae Adams, but his situation has changed.
Yep.
So you can't go off
what
of last
he did with
year.
the Jets, the second half of the year isn't necessarily completely
Right.
telling of what's going to happen with the Rams.
McCaffrey.
Yep.
Been in the league, what, 7 or 8?
7 years?
7
I don't know.
or 8 years?
Something like that.
7 years, something like that. Okay, so three out of the 7 years, you had the McCaffrey letdown.
No factor,
Right?
yeah.
The heartbreak of drafting Christian McCaffrey, right? But 4 of those years, you're talking about top 3 running back, top 2 running back, number one
single-handedly
number
winning
one
your
running
league,
back,
yeah.
someone literally single-handedly winning you your league. I understand the trepidation in drafting McCaffrey, but it's a new year. Like those are the things I'm
He had
talking
a whole
about.
year off. If he's not healthy now,
I mean, those are the things I'm talking about, right? So last year was last year. Use your history, but make sure that there's context and there's relevancy to what you're factoring in to who you're drafting. And the preseason's the preseason.
once
Please.
again, it's a delicate balance. Yeah.
Please, 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 please. I understand that if you're part of a disenfranchised, if you support a team and you've been disenfranchised for a few years and you see them doing well in the preseason and you're just like, oh yeah, great, and there's certain players on that team that you're like, yes, that's who I'm gonna draft. Just remember the preseason's the preseason. Just because your team or certain players really didn't look great in the preseason doesn't mean anything. And just because they looked great in the preseason doesn't mean anything either, right? The preseason is for practice reps. It's for getting started, building familiarity. You got your second and your third stringers of each team out there just kind of
have a roster spot.
Yeah, just showcasing what they're doing to hopefully stay on the roster once all the cuts start happening, right? Do not put too much stock into the preseason and what you see. Oh, this running back was the one that was leading the charge in the preseason, and the supposed starter wasn't on the field. Doesn't mean anything.
Not necessarily. Yeah, it's as with everything, it's a totality of circumstances evaluation. You have to evaluate the totality of circumstances, every circumstance, every piece of data to evaluate, right? And so if, for example, RJ Harvey has had positive, just nothing but positive from camp, from coach, from talent evaluation, RJ Harvey we're in love with. He didn't have a crazy preseason debut.
No.
So what is the outlier piece of information there? Is it the huge chunk of shit that we've got on how awesome RJ Harvey's looking, or is it this preseason game has 7 carries where it was mediocre?
Yeah.
Which is the outlier? You tell me.
Right.
But totality of circumstances, you have to take everything into consideration to get your evaluation going there. So preseason's preseason.
Yeah, preseason is preseason. And don't get cute. Please, don't get cute. We took a break from the off season because there's just so much noise and static and so much irrelevant news that comes out during the off season. What if this? What if that? It's all just all of these what if theories.
Specific stats that support this or support
Yeah,
that.
it's
Most of it's irrelevant. Honest
yeah.
to God.
Look, this game does not have to be that hard. Pick good players on good teams. Don't get cute. Right? Of course there are stats that support anything. There's a stat that will support anything you want to say about any player, right? But at the end of the day, pick good players on good teams, and your drafts should be just fine, right? Don't get too cute. Don't get lost in the stats and the analytics and the noise, right? That can so derail you. It can make you second guess
Everything.
everything. Obvious picks, you're second guessing them now because of what ifs
This
that
certain circumstance.
yeah don't even matter, right? Don't get cute. Pick good players on good teams.
Absolutely.
What you got for us?
Nothing to add on that. The only thing I try to stress as much as possible is fluidity and
Absolutely.
strategy. I mentioned it in the mock draft video too. People are always dogmatic about what strategy is best this year, how to approach this, how to approach that, but I don't believe in that. I don't think it's that simple. If it were that simple, that would be great. But things change from draft to draft, and we've stressed that. You need to stay fluid in everything you do in a draft because every draft could be a little bit different depending on how things shake out, how your league mates value this player, what position is being gobbled up. So there isn't one best strategy at any position. There are some that maybe work more often than others, but at the end of the day, you need to be fluid in how you approach your draft. Just because you had a couple mock drafts that seemed really great by going double wide receiver does not mean that that's going to be your best bet on draft day.
Come draft day, right?
You need to stay fluid in how you approach. The draft strategies are tools. Your robust RB, robust wide receiver, hero running back, hero wide receiver, zero this, zero that. All of them are great tools, great things to understand how to maximize, but you have to understand, once again, your circumstances of your draft to understand which is best. It's not one strategy is best in every circumstance in every draft at every position all the time, and it's not going to be that any year, and this year is no different. So just understand that you need to remain fluid in your draft strategy.
Like water?
Like water.
Be
We
water.
also said that in the mock draft.
Be water, my friend. That's right. That's a great late great Bruce Lee said. So those are your tidbits, those are your nuggets for this year. We hope that you got something out of this. We want you to conquer your league. We want you to rule your Sunday as a fantasy football warrior. So with that, the Fantasy Football Warriors here are signing off for the Tank Sinatra. This is Eddie Bravo. We're signing out. Join the militia!